Welcome to the Story Lab. Today, we have returned to Middle-earth to talk about a new story in Tolkien's world. As we all know, Tolkien's world still holds the potential for many stories. In fact, we have already come up with some of them in this lab. But one adaptation that, I think we can all agree on that, did not work, was or is The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. Today, we will try do better. Could we come up with something else under the same circumstances? Let's see. Here is a Lord of the Rings prequel based only on the appendices. Let's quickly go through what the appendices to the Lord of the Rings contain in terms of story. A few pieces of information about the First and Second Ages. A detailed listing of all kings and queens of Númenor, Orna, and Gondor. A short description of the Battle of the Last Alliance. A lot of information on the Guards of Mordor and how these posts were abandoned. The history of Gondor and their enemies to the east and south. The history of Orna and its eventual breakup into three kingdoms, as well as the war against the Witch King. The history of the Rohirrim and Rohan. The story of Aragorn and Arwen. Hints at Aragorn's early adventures. What can we do with that material? Let's figure it out. Here come our ingredients for today's experiment. We will try to keep them generic, so the lab can surprise us with what the story will be about in particular. The series shall have a direct connection to The Lord of the Rings, justifying the fact that this is a prequel. Naturally, it needs a powerful villain that we have to be afraid of, even as Sauron is still on the horizon. As an expansion of the lore, it should allow glimpses into parts of Middle-earth that we have seen little of before, while still connecting to the parts we know. As with the Rings of Power, we wish to have a small role for hobbits in our story. At least some characters that we have a previous relationship with should be part of the story, while still encountering many new characters with interesting stories of their own. Whatever story we choose in the end, a certain compression of the timeline might be necessary, just as it was for the Rings of Power series. The appendices give information about events only every few years, and while the duration of wars, plagues, falls of kingdoms etc. is very realistic, it might simply not work when trying to tell a story. Thus, we will set the following rule: any compression of the timeline must make the story easier to understand and not contradict the characters' actions. Ideally, it should also harm the canon as little as possible. Okay, let's bring this together with our previous ingredients. Certain compression of timeline is allowed if necessary. Also, we will add the following overall principle: it is a prequel, meaning that the show should set up The Lord of the Rings, or at least parts of it, in one way or another, while still standing on its own 2 feet as a story. The Lord of the Rings, The Fall of Arna. The story that we adapt is the fall of Arna in the war against the Witch King of Angmar, thus setting up the Witch King as a dangerous enemy and giving us insight into why both Arna and Gondor ended up without a king. The story will largely follow original characters except for the kings, but include many familiar locations in their prime such as the Weathertop, Bree, the Shire, and Rivendell when it still had warriors. The story will largely follow men, the ancestors of Aragorn, but also feature some hobbits and elves. The main villain will be the Witch King. It will be a series consisting of 3 seasons. A compression of the timeline will be necessary, since in the appendices the war against the Witch King starting with the attack on Weathertop lasts for more than 400 years. That first battle is fought under the leadership of King Arvaleg I, while the last battles would be fought under King Arvedui, who is Arvaleg's great-great-great-great-great-grandson. In order to compress the timeline for the story, it is proposed to compress the line of kings, such that Arvedui is only the grandson or great-grandson of Arvaleg I. This actually even eliminates some possible name confusion, considering that Arvedui's actual great-grandfather was Arvaleg II. Consequently, some key events are changed slightly. Let's go through the seasons. Season 1. The story follows a group of young men and women living in the troubled kingdom of Arhedain. Though they are part of wealthy families with royal connections, they all feel that they cannot do anything in this kingdom. They are especially troubled by the dark rumors coming out of the other two kingdoms, Rudaur, which was ruled by the Hill people and rumored to be allied with some dark force in the north, and Cardalan, which was failing as well. In addition, the quite old King Arvaleg, who was expected to be a great-grandfather soon, didn't inspire much confidence in the line of kings in Arhedain either. Hence, the group of young people decide to take matters into their own hands and travel to the northeast to check out this rumored enemy there. Through a series of adventures, they do finally get to the lands of Angmar, discovering to their great shock, the armies that the Witch King had prepared for an attack on the peoples of the north. Meanwhile, we get some insight into the complicated politics of Arna at this time, with the old Arvaleg trying to keep the peace while his son the diplomat Aravel negotiates with the leaders of Cardalan and Rudaur. Everything changes when the Witch King's orcs discover the group from Arhedain in their fortress. The men and women are chased out of the fortress, but not before they manage to set part of it in flames, signaling far and wide that something was about to happen. In the capital Fornost-Irain, the leader of the Hill people from Rudaur suddenly attacks the other leaders, announcing his alliance with the Witch King. The leader of the Hill people takes both the princes of Cardalan and Arthedain hostage, so that he can escape, but on his way back to his land is confronted by our group of heroes, who are themselves traveling in the opposite direction. Our heroes free the princes and tell them about the danger waiting in Angmar. This message is brought before the king, who then shows his worth by immediately ordering the preparation of a huge army to take on the forces of Angmar, and even deciding to lead the charge himself. Meanwhile, the Witch King is indeed marching towards Arthedain, laying siege to Rivendell on the way. The two armies meet at Weathertop, where a great battle breaks out. Our heroes fight alongside the two princes they had rescued, but the Prince of Cardalan is killed in the battle. Then, the watchtower on top of Weathertop is taken and destroyed, the old king being killed as well. At this point, Aravel assumes the kingship and the lead of the army. He manages to push back the Witch King, winning the Battle of Weathertop, though the Witch King still besieged Rutor and Rivendell, and Cardalan was now without any leadership and had lost many men. The season ends with the birth of Arvedui, who is prophesied to be the last king of Arna. Season 2. About 12 years pass between seasons. The war against Rudaur Angmar still rages on though. Some of our heroes are still part of the military, others are part of a recolonization project of Cardalan, trying to build a new home there. The season starts with the newest attempt to free the elves of Rivendell, a great battle, wherein King Aravel is badly injured, which leads to his death. Araphant inherits the throne, but given the quick line of succession in his kingdom lately, he decides that his son Arvedui needs to marry immediately, despite being only 12 years old. Araphant plans for Firiel, the daughter of the King of Gondor, to be Arvedui's wife. Some of our heroes are sent south with Arvedui to court the princess. Meanwhile, in the hills of Old Cardalan, the rest of our heroes encounters strange fogs and voices, until they realize that these are in fact wraiths. In what would later be known as the Barrow Downs, our heroes face those wraiths but are wounded and have to flee towards the west. There they are puzzled to encounter some little people, hobbits. The hobbits help them back to their feet and escort them to Bree, from where they would be able to travel on to Fornost. The hobbits are deeply impressed by the loyalty of our heroes that still want to return to the fight, and promise to send help should the king ever ask for it. Meanwhile, Araphant is planning to finish his father's work by freeing Rivendell. In Gondor, we meet several new characters, the King Ondoher and his daughter of course, but also Eärnur, a great leader, and his young son Eärnur. Arvedui and Eärnur become friends, and Eärnur helps Arvedui to impress Firiel. At the same time, Gondor is under pressure as well, with the Wainriders attacking the region. Eärnur and our heroes fight in a battle against them and notice that apparently a coordinated long-term attack against Arna and Gondor is going on, which is why both kingdoms are struggling. However, they do not know what this may signify. A pan into the mountains of Mordor lets the audience see though, the Ringwraith started to take hold in Minas Morgul. Just as our heroes are about to depart Gondor again, Firiel has agreed to the marriage. By the way, another Wainrider attack takes place. They run back to Minas Arna, wanting to help, but arrive too late. King Ondoher has been killed. Luckily, Eärnur has managed to drive back the attackers though. Saddened, the travels depart once more. Firiel suggests that Arvedui should claim the throne now, given that he is the husband of the king's daughter, but the people of Gondor instead crown Eärnil as their new king. As our heroes return north, they meet up with the other characters again in Bree, learning of what has happened there in the meantime. Then they all join in a relief effort for King Arafan's battle. Thanks to their combined efforts, this time, Rivendell is actually freed and Angmar is pushed back for a bit. Season 3. Another time jump has occurred. Arvedui is now a young man. In addition, he has just become king, because, once more, a king of Arthedain has died in the series. Arvedui and the currently pregnant Firiel suspect that the end of the kingdom is near. They are not wrong. Our heroes from the first season, which now are in part high commanders of the army and in part advisors to the king, have bad news for the newly crowned king. Angmar is amassing massive amounts of troops in a strategic position to attack Fornost itself. Arvedui sees the danger and plans to ask everyone for help. He sends our heroes out to sneak past that massive army and return with a relief force from Rivendell. In addition, he sent messages to Gondor and the hobbits asking for help as well. Our heroes take the journey upon themselves but are halted by dangers in the moors and by an encounter with a troll. The Witch King's attack occurs earlier than hoped, and so Fornost is soon destroyed, long before any help, except for the hobbits, had time to arrive. To the shock of the audience, all the hobbits are actually killed, but they do have an impact. They allow Firiel to escape the city. Arvedui too escapes, but in a different direction, eventually hiding in a cave in the Blue Mountains, while his enemies completely took over his capital. At this time, our heroes do return from Rivendell with a force of elven warriors led by Glorfindel, but they are shocked to see the capital has fallen. They do discover Firiel though and manage to save her and the unborn child. Meanwhile, in Gondor, Eärnil receives the messages from the north and sends Eärnur to help. Eärnur comes as quickly as he can, but is too late as well. He unites with the elves and our heroes in the Grey Havens, where they start planning a great attack to take back Fornost. Arvedui meanwhile is losing hope. Trapped in the old dwarf mines, the king and his men are plagued by hunger. They try to see in the two palantir that they have with them what is going on, but are only shown Fornost time and time again. Finally, Arvedui decides to head out again, north into the realms of the snowmen. They do so, just as Eärnur and our heroes come up with a plan for their attack. Luckily, he is seen by some elves and Círdan sends a ship north to meet Arvedui in the icy lands. Arvedui encounters the snowmen and is helped by them, giving them the Ring of Barahir as a thank you. Then the elven ship arrives and Arvedui boards it against the snowmen's advice. Unfortunately, the ship sinks, just as further south, Arvedui's son is born. The series is not over though, as our heroes are still preparing for the great battle. They do attack Fornost and manage to drive the Witch King out. Just then, help arrives from the north in form of the snowmen. This way, the enemies are defeated, all but the Witch King, which Eärnur cannot reach. Glorfindel calms him down, prophesying that no man would kill the Witch King. With the battle won, but Arna fallen, the series ends. But hope remains, as the elves promise to watch over the newborn son of Arvedui, who will be the first of the chieftain of the Dunedain. To summarize our series, The Lord of the Rings, The Fall of Arna plays out the time of war, when the Northern Kingdom fell to the forces of the Witch King of Angmar and the line of kings transformed to be the line of chieftains, from whom Aragorn would one day descend. In Season 1, our new heroes discover the danger of Angmar, rude our allies with the Witch King, the Battle of Weathertop occurs and Arvedui is born. In Season 2, our heroes encounter the hobbits, Arvedui travels to Gondor to court Firiel, Gondor is attacked by Wainriders and in the north, Rivendell is freed from its siege. And finally in Season 3, Fornost is taken before our heroes can arrive with help from the elves and Gondor. Arvedui travels to the icy north where he dies, but our heroes do save Firiel and her newborn child and defeat the Witch King at Fornost. What do you think? Would you like to see this series? Please note that everything presented here is simply the results of an experiment. No part of this presentation is intended as a correction of an existing story or claims to be the real story. The selection or omission of any parts of the source material is not to be understood as commentary, positive or negative, on the original productions. These are simply thoughts and experiments based on existing material, and none of it could be created without the work of all those involved in creating the original works. As with any scientific result, you may utilize any of the story ideas that resulted from these experiments for your own experiments or production, while citing this experiment as its source. It is now closing time for our lab. Goodbye until next time.